I want to get into
Let's do it.
the Bungie one.
Let's do
Steel,
it.
look, Bungie
Oh,
has
man.
seen, man, it's just not been good. They have gone through the ringer. I don't know who you can actually blame. Is it the studio? Is it leadership?
System.
Is it a
It's leadership.
combination of the both? Is Sony it to blame? Listen, I don't know. I mean, there's going to be a lot of opinions here, but what's interesting is we saw the latest DLC come out for Destiny 2, and like I said, people that are Destiny 2 fans quite enjoyed the final shape. And it had very high praise. It was reviewed very well. Unfortunately, a game, i.e., Hi-Fi Rush, can be reviewed very well and, well, not sell a lot. And then things happen. Well, thanks to the sales being extremely on the low side versus expectations, some things happened with Bungie. We saw the reports where the board that consisted of two Bungie leadership positions versus Sony's one switched, meaning Sony had two, Bungie had one, and we got word that Herman Holtz is now running that studio. We also got some really ugly background information about, $2.3 million being spent for classic cars while people were getting let go in the first round of layoffs, which were 100 people.
Sure. Yeah.
That's ugly. I don't like it, but, I mean, he built his company. He's spending his money. I guess, that's fine. And what I have in front of me is shout out to J-Rock who posted this on the socials. And it says Marathon is in development hell, according to Jason Schreier. So I do have that 1 minute and 17-second clip.
Part of this equation, of course, is the human part, which is that like Bungie just lost between the layoffs and the Sony moves. They've lost something like 500, 600 people over the last 2 years, a lot of whom were on either the Destiny team or support teams like QA and narrative and audio and player support. And so losing those people, you are losing resources. You are losing people who contributed a lot to the game. And the people who are remaining are going to have to work twice as hard because they have to do jobs of people who are now gone. And it's just kind of a messy situation that will just inevitably lead to challenges, unfortunately, for those people left.
And I mean, speaking of, I was going to say, what's the temperature check on how Marathon is going?
Not great from what I've heard. There's a reason that it was planned for this year and slipped a whole year, and people that I've talked to are a little pessimistic about it even hitting its current planned deadline, but we'll see. I don't know exactly when that is, sometime in 2025. I'm not sure. Yeah, I mean, the sentiment I've heard is not great around it, at least as of a few months ago.
Well, there you go, ladies and gentlemen. That's directly from the horse's mouth, so to speak, Jason Schreier. And I'll put it to this way. The chuckle before he answers tells me all I need to know. That it's just not in good shape. He brings up, again, a great point about how many jobs, how many loss of jobs they've been in the last 2 years. That retention that was expected to be, quote unquote, hold the line for the talent is gone. People are leaving. People are being laid off. There's a lot going on there. I don't think this is the last time we've heard layoffs. I unfortunately think it's going to be worse before it gets better. The issue at hand is how do they continue to work on Marathon and put out a solid, games as a service product when their last entry, even though it was reviewed very well, Steel, is just not selling. People got a distaste for Bungie because of the layoffs. People thought that, to be honest with you, the Destiny got a little long in the tooth. I stopped playing years ago, not because the game is bad. It's because there's only so much time in a day, and I'm limited to what time, and I can only play so many, black hole games as they're known. I only have, I play for an hour, 2 hours a day. Maybe if I'm lucky and the old man doesn't kick in and I'm up past midnight, I play for 3 hours a day. But that's not always the case. But let's get your hot take on this report. And I think that it is scaling, in my opinion, regarding the sentiment and the feeling of what's going on currently at Bungie and Marathon. I mean, you heard it right from the horse's mouth, Steel. It slipped this year. It may not even hit next year. That is bad news for Bungie, but I think worse news for Sony, to be honest with you.
Oh yeah, it definitely is more so bad for Sony than anything else. Just because they stepped into this deal, at least from my understanding and from what we were led to believe. This entire deal was to help them with their live service strategy, or to figure out ways to diversify their multiplayer bag, for lack of a better way to put it. I have a love-hate relationship with Bungie, as a player who spent a lot of time in their world, and understand what Bungie has brought to the table fundamentally, right? I was what I would recall as a Bungie lever, right? I was a believer in everything that they would do, right? All the way up to, I would say, probably Witch Queen, maybe a little bit after that, because I did invest into Lightfall. But Destiny lost me a while ago when you started seeing some of the cracks. This was, and this was even after Microsoft, under Activision, when they were pulling content that you had paid for as a player, and giving you excuses for story reasons why that content can't exist anymore. Not only that, but again, and I get it. It's a looter shooter, grinding. It's all a part of the world. But giving you content that you can grind thousands of hours for, sometimes it takes that long to get what you're particularly looking for. To have those items taken away and then be sold to you years later, it's not the greatest feeling. And the thing that's really strange to me about Bungie as well is that, for as big as a team as they have working on one game, from Destiny 1 to Destiny 2, and keep in mind, they only went to Destiny 2 because they ran into issues in Destiny 1 that required for them to get to just build the entire new game. Why, with all the monetization strategies that you have now caused, season passes, paying for dungeons, paying for the expansion pass for the year, and this is turned into a yearly thing, with all the money that you had been making from this, with all the people that have been playing your game, why do you still have a difficult time supporting yourself? And you're supposed to be the example for what live service is. And it's crazy to me as well, because what Destiny 2 is today, it wasn't like that in the first few years of the game being out, right? So this is another game that is taking 6 years for it to finally reach a solid place, and it still is not even getting the type of engagement that they are looking for, right? And at this point, at what point do you start looking at the studio themselves and their lack of consistency, or lack of spirit, or lack of boom? I tell everybody this all the time. I am a multiplayer lover, right? Co-op, PvP,
Yes, you are.
PvP
is my main thing, brother.
PvP is my thing. Destiny demonstrated to me early on, I want to say in year 2 of Destiny 2, that they were not going to support PvP. And this was an issue that they carried over from Destiny 1 to, and then I years later find out that, oh, well, that team was pulled to make Marathon. Okay. But Destiny 2's PvP was good though, right? And so it's really confusing to me to see the kings of the originators, the grandfather of this first-person shooter space adventure that really puts you in the seat of whatever character that you create, have a difficult time deciding what it even wants to be. I got told for years after I dropped off of Destiny that Destiny is, when I used to talk to my homies about it, when I used to talk to people in the community about Destiny, that, oh, well, Destiny's not a PvP game anymore. It's just PvE, man. You should just get over it. That's just where their money is now. And it's like, so a team that was able to do both in Halo, you're telling me is a team that can't do both now is not selling the game that they sold the vision on before. It is not a true MMO. Does not feel that way most of the time. They have gotten better with even that over the years. So, and if they're struggling now with this, and you're seeing like, now we're hearing from Jason Schreier that even Marathon is in trouble, or they don't have a vision for it, because apparently we got additional information that it may end up being a hero shooter.
Yep.
More in the vein of like a Overwatch style game. So now we're going from a Tarkov extraction type shooter, which again, I know people say the market is flooded, but really tell me a game other than Tarkov that comes to mind that's a good extraction shooter. I'll wait.
There
If
there
you
aren't
can't-
any.
If you can't give me 3 at least, then the market's not flooded. There just hasn't
Correct.
been the one. Bungie could create that one, but they obviously don't even believe in themselves. There is something happening at an upper management level, whether it's upper game designers, whether it's upper art design, whoever it may be. Somebody has lost complete vision in whatever they're trying to do within their own IP and branch out. And it's only become more apparent under Sony because Sony does not have the infrastructure for this. So like this news is going to end up hitting these streets because you brought these people in under the guise that they were going to help you run yours. And now you have games that people are saying, well, Jim Ryan, he highlighted all these, he greenlit all these other games, you know, Last of Us, Spider-Man. It's seemingly to me like maybe Jim Ryan had the right idea, but the wrong people there's still people in who have the wrong vision. And bringing Bungie in has only exposed the lack of vision even further. Because again, if Marathon doesn't come out and be the one, Bungie's not going to exist as they had ever been before. This will be another what's the example that you guys use? BioWare situation where it is a complete shell of itself. And I think they're already at that level. We've been seeing people leave Bungie for years. Games development has only gotten further in that game. This is the 10-year game, right? This is the 10-year game, live service game that most people ask for. And it still can't support itself. Even WoW can support itself.
Indeed.
So I just start kind of asking myself, like, who's the question? Who's the problem? There has to be more things going on here. I have a complete lack of faith in Bungie, and what they can create. Again, that bridge has been burnt for me too many times as a gamer, as a enjoyer of their worlds, that I'm not even willing at this point to give Marathon a try if it releases with all the things that we're continuing to hear. Now, again, we'll see, but this doesn't bode well for the industry, as we were talking about people still being able to be what they are with like Tango. I don't think that that's going to be the case with Bungie. And people were like, oh, well, Bungie has this deal where they're not going to get folded into PlayStation if they do the ABC things. And Bungie burnt the books to even get in the door. So now they're getting folded regardless. Like, it's just, it feels really scummy. And question makes me have more questions in what's happening in that ecosystem over there. And again, those quotes we were getting from Hiroki Totoki, man, they're starting to, I had to shout out to Pong on that, man. He brought up a point. He was like, it's really starting to seem like the main crux that he was talking about is Bungie. Your Naughty Dogs, your these teams that spend all this time creating these experiences, these games, and for whatever reason they don't get out on the market. So it's crazy, man. It's unfortunate to hear that Bungie's in that state. Again, we were all looking at 343, and yes, they have their stuff to work on as well. But I never would have, if you would have asked me 4 years ago that, hey man, do you think Bungie is going to be falling off, or are you not as excited for their next game? I would have told you, nah, man, you crazy, man. And I still think that they have the best shooter on the market in Destiny, and don't choose to maximize the experience. but they're asking themselves questions about, oh man, where's the money? Where's the players? Where's this? Where's that? I don't know, man. It opens a lot of doors, it opens a lot of questions. But yeah, man, I'm extremely jaded about it. I can talk about hours about Bungie and everything that they've kind of been seemingly hinting at over the years for their direction. And again, there's more information coming out now as well that Activision was pulling the reins back on them from adding even more things to buy in Destiny 2. It's like, bro, what is happening behind the scenes? It's just extremely interesting. So,
Fuzzy, let's bring you in on it now. Steele made a point, a couple of really, really good points. So I want to add some context to it. The question that has been asked: if the savior of gas games and how they're run was the Bungie purchased, right? Why they went out and spent $3.6 billion on Bungie is for their experience, their know-how on how to make gas games profitable. Well, who saves the savior? Well, it's not Bungie. And so Bungie finds themselves in the crosshairs. So what Steele also mentioned is some quotes from Hiroki Totoki, who is the Sony president, the CEO, and the CFO of Sony Interactive Entertainment. He gave some details on the restructuring of Bungie. This comes the way of Genki_JPN. He goes on to say, the purpose is cost restructure and portfolio optimization. He goes on to say, we have to enhance efficiency of the business itself. Bungie's back office functions will be integrated into Sony Interactive Entertainment. Bungie headcount and resources will be concentrated into Destiny 2 and Marathon. Other title developments at Bungie will be transferred to PlayStation Studios, and finally optimize overall studio structure. Now we have heard rumors that this is just rumors, that Bungie knows how to spend money, not necessarily knows how to make it. And a perfect example of, well, we're seeing what happens. Let's get your hot take on the Jason Schreier report, where things aren't going so well for Team Bungie when it comes to Marathon. And obviously, it was supposed to release in 2024, slipped until 2025. And based on the information that we just played live on the air for you, may even slip into 2026. That is potentially disastrous for both Bungie and Sony Interactive Entertainment.
Well, before I tackle the Jason Schreier, because I'm not a fan of his, but we'll get to that shortly. I want to tackle the Hiroki Totoki quotes and everything. All of those statements are basically in the business world saying you can't do your job, so we're going to take some of that responsibility off your plate and redistribute it amongst the company, because obviously you're a screw up. We don't want to fire you just yet, but we want to at least get this stuff that's costing us money done so we can get the return on investment. That's basically what he's saying. I would have never thought, like, after this acquisition, when everybody was saying, oh, this is better than what Activision and Microsoft's acquisition was going to be. We all see it's not
why
even
he's
done
fired,
and we see where things are going. So let's be clear on it. Bungie, whether it's Pete Parsons or others, I tend to point more towards him for buying cars as opposed to maybe putting some of that reinvestment back into the company to retain some of your talent there, or letting them get that investment after being with the company for so long and they're like a week or two away from investment, so they can get some of the internal shares. You go and lay them off, like specifically the ones that are closest to that investment. It's like, if that's not the maker of evil within the corporate space, I don't know what is. I mean, yeah, there's other things that can be done. I'm not saying he should give up his entire bonus to keep either others employed or things along those lines, but these are scummy moves that typically the CEO that probably is good at starting a company but terrible at running a company usually do. And it's unfortunate that Sony had to find out this way. Like I said, I would have thought, and normally when you see a bad relationship, you usually are like, oh well, Microsoft, they were terrible. Okay, no problem. Then you go over to Activision. Oh well, they were terrible. Now you get to Sony. You could say maybe Sony was terrible, but no. Obviously, now we've learned that Bungie was the problem all along, and Sony's got the fix for it. It's called dissolvement. If you wait long enough, you'll see. But back to Jason Schreier with the I guess you could say development hell for Marathon and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a fan of the dude for the fact that if it was Microsoft, hey, the second highest person at a particular studio could leave for any number of reasons, and it's like front page news, and obviously Microsoft's at fault. They suck at what they do, mismanagement this, mismanagement that. But he's kind of probably known this stuff for some time. Like,
right.
I'm not an insider, but I know a father of a former Destiny dev that was talking about this 2 years ago. It's been a known thing. Anybody that has any insight to Sony, which Jason Schreier does, that it was a dumpster fire from jump.
Yep.
And prove it. Let's look at the games that got shot down versus what was approved. You shot down, factions, which, okay, let's just say Naughty Dog didn't know what they were doing. They couldn't remember how they got Factions 1 to be somewhat, enjoyable, and then transfer that to Factions 2. No, let's just assume that, right? Bungie shoots it down. They spent all this money and time in that. And that game, I guarantee you, even in its most broken state, would probably double the revenue for Sony of any of the DLC that came from Destiny. And here's why.
Indeed. 1,000%.
Let's look at the day before. If any of you remember, yes, I know it was a scam. Development group was terrible, but just the thought of that type of environment and that type of game had people wish listing it beyond all recognition. Like the only thing that ever beat it out was Hogwarts on the wish list. Now I know that's not a definitive way to judge how well a game will do, but that shows that there is so much interest in this like zombie apocalypse, PvP, PvE type of scenario. Like if you could mash up the best things of The Division and The Last of Us, that's what they should have just made. And I guarantee you, if they released it just with the most basic stuff, people would have enjoyed it enough to stick with it for them to learn or figure out what they need to do to keep the game going. They would have, as long as they listen to the player base.
Yeah, the players will tell you. Yeah.
They would have had years and years of revenue and years of content that they could have pushed out and made money off without any problem. But I always joked about it. I was like, well, maybe Destiny or the Bungie saw that this would make them less relevant. So we got to, like maybe an internal competition thing. Well, let's shoot those guys down. Helldivers, they couldn't shoot down because that was like 90% across the finish line by the time they came in to, give a thumbs up or thumbs down. And we all see how the studio head over at Arrowhead would have probably said, F you, we're still going to put this game out the way it is. These guys may not be all that they claim to be. So he has, I know it's an afternoon show, but he had the testicular fortitude to, to push that his game was the way it should be and push it out the door. And we see the success it had. Now, granted, it's not in that same spot now, but I think a lot of that is thanks to PlayStation pushing its, PSN ID. However you feel about it, there are still people that are, opposed to those things. And Sony could have made it work. Like, yeah, you may not have the internal numbers on exactly every player, but if you just look at the amount of players in the game, that you could take to the board and say, okay, we learned from this that we should probably start with the PSN ID stuff from get-go, or we need to incentivize people to switch to that, whether it's give them skins or season pass stuff, whatever. They could have made that their learning curve for how to deal with, the PC space moving forward. Instead, they went with the nuclear option and, kind of killed the momentum that game had. Now we'll see with continued content if that ever comes back, but it was kind of like a learning process for Sony, more so than Arrowhead, because I think they had all of the things in place that would have made that a success and continue to keep it a success. But the nasty taste from at least the PC crowd with the launcher, or not a launcher, but the PSN stuff, that definitely killed that. But moving on for it, Bungie looking over at, the Spider-Verse or the Spider-Man game. Like, let's be clear here. A game like that, considering you could sell all kinds of Spider-Man skins and Spider-Man or Spider-Verse related things to that game, that would have been an easy cash cow for them. And somehow that got shot down. Yes, it's a licensing thing. Yes, they'd have to give up a nice chunk to Marvel or Disney in that regard, but that would have still probably recouped a lot of funds that they have tied up into their Marvel contracts as it exists now, that it would have still been worthwhile. All of that said, somehow Bungie got into somebody's ear to, maybe this isn't the right look, but they approved Concord, which looks almost like Destiny PvP Lite. It has some of the appearance. Now, I didn't have hands-on to say from a gunplay standpoint, it has that same exact feel, but it had the look, at least, of some of the PvP stuff that you would see in Destiny that has been ignored for years. And you would think that would have been the perfect opportunity for them to kind of focus or put that focus in Marathon. But now that they're going with this hero shooter thing, much like Concord, I don't know. Maybe that was why they approved it, because some of the things that they saw that Firewalk was doing, or Fire Sprite, or whatever their name is, was what they wanted to do or see some potential in for their Marathon game. But I remember hearing the reports before with they brought in Escape from Tarkov people to ask them what they thought of it, and they're like, I wouldn't play this. And once again, people will say Escape from Tarkov is niche. I mean, you have DMZ and a couple other things like with Battlefield that they tried as well. That was like an extraction shooter. To me, and I'm not the biggest PvP guy, I'll be honest. I leave that to people like Steel that are more of that on the edge of multiplayer PvP and stuff along those lines. But I still love how the original Dark Zone was for Division 1. Division 2, splitting it up kind of watered it down a bit, and it didn't keep it as consistent, or it made it so you didn't have quite the same type of encounters or as many encounters as you would with the way Division 1 was set up. But I still think that was the epitome of an extraction shooter. And the fact that that game has been it's still got a player base. It's still successful by Ubisoft standards. I'm surprised that Bungie hasn't looked at that and then taken what the player base and some that have left or that refuse to leave Division 1 and still play the Dark Zone in the Division 1, why they haven't taken that or the feedback from launch and just make that for Marathon. Like, that was more so what people wanted, where you could get backstabbed at the extraction point, instead of just making it where it's like, oh, camp here and shoot everybody that walks past this alleyway or whatever. No, just have it focus on, hey, you can work together, but then, when it's time to get out of there, then choices can kind of go south or go left or whatever. I think that would have been their better approach when it comes to Marathon. But if it's in development hell, it's already slipped out of 2024. It could slip out of 2025. I don't know why Jason Schreier doesn't have the full-on, transcript out there about how
he does, but he just chooses not to. Yeah.
It just feels like there's a cover-up. I know conspiracy theory, tinfoil hat, whatever, but it just feels like, oh, I don't want to talk bad about a game I enjoy playing, even if I'm not enjoying it at the moment, because it's my preferred platform. But if had this been Xbox, I mean, shout out to Phil for dodging a bullet when they were in talks with Bungie about acquisition.
Yep.
I'm pretty sure Phil and team probably looked at the books. Credit to like Steel and Pong as far as, they cooked the books and they probably saw right through that mess. So I'm glad Xbox passed on that. I got flack for when I said, Xbox didn't want to spend the money or it was, too pricey. And people were like, they just spent billions of dollars on Bethesda. I'm like, no, it's not that it's too expensive. They can't afford it. It's too expensive for what it's worth. It's like, they're not going to overpay. Like, if you go to the dealership and you see, one of the new Demon Challengers out there, and it's like, oh, sticker says 120, but the dealership is saying 220. You're not paying that extra 100,000 for the car. They can go kick rocks at that point. That's the situation with Bungie. And you know, maybe that some of that overpayment that the guy wanted was so he can add to his car collection. We'll never truly know, but it kind of seems that was what that was about. It's like, hey, our real price is $2 billion. We want $4 billion, so I can put $2 billion to my car collection. And you know, that's how it went down. But yeah, this is a dumpster fire that's going to continue to burn until Sony finally takes everything over. And we'll see if Pete Parsons, you know, leaves and starts, you know, Bungie 2 or whatever he wants to call it. Maybe he should call it Car Collectors Anonymous or something. And that will be his next studio, and see how it goes from there. But yeah, I've rambled enough. I'm sorry.